Welcome, everybody. Welcome. We're just waiting for everybody to come into the room, virtual and in person. So please just give us another minute or two and we'll get started momentarily. So just a few minutes for everybody to come in and join us. Welcome, everybody. We're just going to take a couple of minutes as we wait for everybody to join us. Okay, welcome, everyone. Welcome. Just waiting for everybody to get settled. Bear with us for a minute. Okay, Mr. Panico, I think we're just about there if you want to get started whenever you're ready.
Good evening and welcome to a meeting of the Hunterdon Central Regional High School Board of Education. Please be advised that this and all meetings of the board are open to the public and media, consistent with the Open Public Meetings Act, and that advance notice required therein has been provided. Meeting notice is also posted in the boardroom of the Upper School campus, sent to the Courier News, Star Ledger, Express Times, and the Hunterdon County Democrat, and sent to the clerks of Delaware Township, East Amwell Township, Flemington Borough, Raritan Township, and Reading Township. The public will have an opportunity to be heard as shown on the agenda. Please stand for a flag salute. Thank you. Can I have a roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Davidson,
Here.
Mrs. Hughes,
Here.
Mr. Nickel,
Here.
Mr. Richard,
Here.
Mr. Panico,
Here.
Mrs. Kellogg,
Here.
Dr. Charney,
Here.
Dr. Nguyen,
Here.
Mrs. O'Donnell. Okay.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the regular and executive session minutes of July 19th, 2021, please?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Mr. Davidson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Nickel,
Yes.
Mr. Richard,
Yes.
Mr. Panico,
I'm going to abstain. I was absent.
Mrs. Kellogg,
Yes.
Dr. Charney,
Yes.
Dr. Nguyen.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. There are 3 items of correspondence as noted on the agenda. So Dr. Moore, now I'll turn it over to you for your superintendent's report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Panico. And I just want to offer some thanks as well for all the folks who help us set up for these meetings. And, tonight we have Tim Klein. I see Justin Moss back there, Jim Johnson at the camera. Nancy Tucker does a lot of work behind the scenes as well, preparing for these board meetings. And as we've moved locations back into the little theater, we're still sort of in a strange arrangement, but happy to be back in this space that we all are familiar with for our board meetings. It's certainly more comfortable for our attendees here in person. We are still unfortunately masking, and we'll talk more about that in my presentation tonight. So a few things to go through tonight. First off, we have 3 administrative hires on the agenda tonight, and I just want to say a couple of words in introduction before we head into the agenda to vote. First, I'm pleased to recommend Mr. Ed Brandt, to be our principal. Ed has been serving in the capacity of acting principal and also as Dean of Students. Maybe not. maybe not the last round of applause he'll get tonight. He excels. He excelled at every level of the multi-tiered selection process that we embarked on to select our next principal. But I have to say, Ed has been our principal over the past months, and so I can imagine no one else who can do what he can do in that role, and I look forward to all of that. Second, you'll notice Miss Heather Spitzer on the stage tonight. And also on our agenda, I'm recommending her to be Jimlin's replacement as Jimlin heads off to retirement. Ms. Spitzer has been working closely with Jimlin as the assistant BA and has her fingerprints next to Jimlin's on a lot of the stewardship, efficiency, and good work that the business office has always been doing to ensure solvency and wise decision-making through some really tough times, including the pandemic. And to bring us clean audits through it all. So I'm really pleased and excited for Heather to take on that role that I know she's well prepared for and ready to do well with us. Also, I am recommending Mr. Charles Roberto to serve as our Supervisor of Technology. And I think I see him out in the audience. There he is. Charles brings a unique blend of skill and experience in the private sector with experience in the classroom. And what struck me most is whenever asked about various technology challenges during our selection process, he impressed us with answers that focused on the humans in the room, the staff and the students using the technology and the skills and decision-making that they bring to bear, and not just the technology itself. So he has a good round understanding of the work that we do, and I'm looking forward to working with him. It'd be a mistake, of course, to share all of this hope without noting that this is Jimlin Corbin's last Board of Education meeting with us at Hunterdon Central. And as I shared, when you accepted her retirement, we will certainly miss her, despite our confidence in Ms. Spitzer and our excitement to bring her into that position. So thank you, Jimlin, for your service to the district. Right, so I have some reopening information to share tonight, and I'm also going to turn it over very briefly in that presentation to Mr. Brandt to share some information about orientation. So bear with me, we do have one of my reopening presentations to work through tonight, but there's a lot of important information to go through at this point in the summer. So I'm just going to gear up here to share my screen. And I'm going to set up my screen here so the board members can turn around and watch us on the screen in the back. Just bear with me one second. Yeah, if you want to relocate to the seats down below or just turn around to watch.
Watch your step.
Okay, thank you everybody watching online for your patience as we went through all of that. And let me turn on our screen here in the room. Okay, so we talked tonight about continued confidence as we're sitting here on August 16th, very near the beginning of the 21-22 school year. And again, I sound notes of confidence despite some of the things that we're still contending with, and a situation public health wise that is challenging to us and which we remark and note is one of the worst public health situations maybe we've seen in recent months through the pandemic. We're approaching levels of transmission and spread and disease that are rivaling what we saw at the beginning of the holiday season, at the end of the fall, going into the winter. So we have those concerns, but we have lots of opportunities, lots of lessons learned, and lots of things working in our favor this time around too. So I always start these presentations, and I'll do it quickly this time, of course, with this diagram sort of talking about the different realms in which we do our work as we face the pandemic. And I'm happy to report this year with all of the various guidelines and guidance that we have, mandates that we have, that education and wellness of our kids are at the forefront. And the public health stuff that took such center stage last year, while still important to us this year, is giving us room to talk about, you know, the education and wellness imperatives that we have as we move into this school year. And this is a unique year that we're moving into, certainly. I have to go through a few nuts and bolts here on talking about how some of the regional classification works and how there are differences between some of the schemes that are being presented to all of us as we try to understand what's going on in our county. There are basically two different grading criteria that we look at to determine how things are going with regard to COVID in Hunterdon County. The CDC has a measurement of how well our county is doing, and the Department of Health here in New Jersey has a separate measurement for how well our county is doing. And we need to talk about those differently because I hear people talking about them interchangeably, but they're very different. So the CDC has 4 levels, blue through red. And they base the level that they assign to each individual county across the country on the positivity rate, so how many tests come back positive for COVID-19, and the total number of new cases out of 100,000. So that's a measurement that is a total over 7 days. So if you have a bad day in your county, it works right into the total as a sum rather than as an average. Under the CDC framework, we are red. We're the highest level in terms of transmission. And that's based on those 2 metrics primarily. What's the positivity rate of tests and what's the total number of new cases? The interesting thing about this metric is it seems to be that if one of those is high, that's the grade you get. They don't sort of average out. That's what it seems to us. It's never been explained to us that way, but that's what it seems to look like to us. Now, the Department of Health has their 4 levels, and these are the ones that we've always used. These are the ones that we've been using for the past 18 or so months to understand the spread of the disease in our region. They also have 4 levels, green, yellow, orange, and red. This is based on 3 separate metrics, and those are averaged together, which is an important difference and a key difference in one particular way here. So positivity rate, again, same as the CDC. Hospital activity, so they measure COVID-like illness diagnostic codes coming out of our community health systems. So that's a metric here. How overwhelmed or underwhelmed is our hospital is a metric here that's important to the Department of Health's metrics. And average of new cases out of 100,000 over the past 7 days. So an average of new cases as opposed to a total of new cases presents a very different situation. If you have a bad day and you're averaging, that works out different than if you have a bad day and you're adding all of those days together. It works out a little different. And so we tend to look at the DOH thing and note that it seems to be a little more forgiving, if that's the right word. We seem to be at a lower level generally with the state metric than with the CDC metric. A couple other differences. There's the CDC metric is down to each individual county. The state metric is 3 counties, in our region, Somerset, Mercer, and Hunterdon. And then also the timeliness of the data is important too, where the CDC is generally updated pretty regularly. The Department of Health ones are generally lagged by about a week. So it's tough to nail down where you are on any given day, which is why we've made such progress and had to make such progress in partnerships with our local public health and medical communities to understand on a day-to-day basis what things look like. So we're yellow under the state metric, and that's important. That difference is important. So we are only the 2nd level up in the state metric. Again, that data is a little old. We're approaching orange potentially. So we could be moving into the 3rd level here of orange, which is where we've been at different times last school year. Whereas in the CDC metric, we're all the way up to red. So I wanted to share this because people talk about us being in red or being in yellow or this is what they're talking about. And sometimes those conversations are using these things interchangeably. We are in red, we're also in yellow. We're in red under the CDC's metric, we're in yellow under the state's metric. So that's the difference. So schools have been trained over the past 18 months to use the yellow the yellow Department of Health metric. That's the one that we've based all of our decisions on. That's the one that all of our guidance is based on. The CDC one is still new to us. So everything I'm going to talk about tonight is still keyed to the state metrics in which we are still yellow. Okay, so that's an important thing to say up front. As much nuts and bolts as that is to front load, I do think it'll become clear as we go through it and I talk about some of the different contingencies. So safe return planning, back in June, I talked about this. We have 8 areas in which we're required to plan based on our acceptance of federal funding. So I'll go through those very quickly. The first area is universal and correct wearing of masks. And of course, the thing to point out right at the outset here is that Governor Murphy issued that executive order on August 6th, which requires us to start the year masked indoors. Now, it's a requirement. It has the force of law behind it. There are certainly ways to advocate for or against the thoughts of this executive order, but outright defying it is not an option for schools in New Jersey. And I just want to make that clear that that's not an option for us. We have no option to just not do this. Once this lifts, though, we will like to get back to our initial thought about this school year, which is if we're in green and yellow, we'd like to allow families to decide on masking with the strong encouragement that we've heard from our public health partners to share with folks who are unvaccinated that they should mask. However, and we'll talk later in our vaccination section, vaccination status is not something that we are planning to inquire about, or we're not planning to require the vaccination unless mandated to do so. So if we can get ourselves out from underneath this mandate and we can stay in a solid public health situation in green or yellow on the state's grading here, we hope to be able to get back to a masking posture that's more flexible. Distancing and cohorting, we are committed to all students being on campus every day, all day. And that's a priority we're getting from the state government. And to the degree that the state government is even saying, don't take other measures like distancing that get in the way of you achieving this priority. So distancing is important to us. We're going to maximize on distancing wherever it's practicable and possible. But distancing is not going to get in our way to meeting the goal of having everyone here all day, every day. We are allowed to have lunch. We weren't really allowed to have lunch under the distancing and masking rules of last year. This year, we can. And so distancing may be challenged in different corners during the school day, certainly will be, but we have some of those thoughts covered in some of the other steps that we have to take. And one of those steps is with lunch. Because of these requirements, we have to open the year with multiple lunch blocks. Sanitization and spacing require us to provide a lunch that is easy to keep in certain areas of the school. And the only way to do that is to split lunch into multiple sessions. We hope that we can get back to a unit lunch as soon as we can, but we simply must open the year with 2 lunches is what we're looking at to open the year. And then as we get further through the year, hopefully we can get back to 1. We do have contingencies as well, however, to go to 4 lunches if we need to, and we're hoping we don't ever need to do that. 2 is as far as really I'd like to go with splitting lunch up, because I recognize the value that unit lunch has for our kids as a break with each other in the day. So I'll be eager to get back to that. We are not planning to offer a program of full remote instruction, except in those very limited circumstances where we're required to. And we are planning to put a lot of effort and a lot of resources into expanding off-hours tutorial services through Zoom and other platforms for kids to be able to make use of. We're going to continue to use Google Classroom to keep things updated. So if a student has to go out on quarantine, for example, they'll still have access to teaching and they'll have access to the materials that they have to keep up with. We are not planning, though, to run cameras live from classrooms. That was a situation that we found ourselves in last year by necessity, but it really compromises our ability to deliver the kind of instruction that we want to deliver. That's something that I heard over and over and over again from our staff and from our students as well. We may have to talk about, if the situation gets bad enough, going back to a cohorting kind of system. That is, half the students come in on this day, half the students come in on that day, kind of like what we were doing last year. However, we're going to reserve that approach for only the highest levels of concern. So I don't see us going to that. I'm talking about levels of concern and spread that we never got to last school year. So we continue to prioritize, again, in the spirit of what's been delivered to us by the Department of Education and the governor, we continue to prioritize all kids every day, all day, and to a much more robust degree than the guidance allowed us to do last year. We're excited about that. Hand washing and respiratory etiquette, we're going to continue to offer hand sanitizing gel, at 60% at least alcohol. I believe that's the number. If I'm wrong about that, whatever the number is what we've got. We have hand sanitizing gel just about everywhere in all of our classrooms and gathering points and meeting points. We have buckets of the stuff. We're also going to continue the signage for our students and continue the messaging for our students. We do continue to believe that personal hygiene is one of the most effective ways to combat this virus, and that at the end of the day, how you're sort of keeping, how you're taking care of yourself and how you're keeping yourself clean is your etiquette in terms of sneezing and coughing. All of these things are important to helping mitigate the spread, just as important in some ways as some of the other steps that we've taken over the past 18 months, and some of which we'll continue to take as we move forward. Healthy facilities, we are going to have a heightened level of sanitization, not to quite the degree that we had through much of last year, although we're reserving that level. Everyone sanitizing everything every time they get up or sit down. That's something that we would revisit if we needed to, if the community spread in our local area got to the point where we felt that was necessary. But we are looking at daily sanitization. We're going to deploy units to clean the air and surfaces. We have one in the back here, or in the middle of the little theater here. We'll have those in all different places throughout campus, gathering points specifically like cafeterias and such, to keep air and surfaces clean. Our ventilation system, windows open, doors open, we feel that that's all going to continue to be effective to maintaining a healthy facility. We may require, as I said earlier, more heightened sanitization if we get up into orange or red on that state grading. That's when we could be considering, gosh, do we need 4 lunch blocks instead of 2 in order to create the sanitization scenario and the distancing that we need? We might also at that level have to think about limiting public access and even internal access to some of our facilities. Right now, we're hopeful that we can continue to offer our facilities to the community for all of the rec games and all of the uses and all of the community uses that folks have been used to before the pandemic. We're hoping that we can remain in a position where we can keep that going. Right now, we're open for business. If the condition in our community gets much worse, however, we may have to begin sort of tightening up a little bit. This is a room, for example, that's difficult to clean because of all the fabric and all of the carpeting. So this is a room that comes out of circulation when we start to reach a level of spread that's concerning. But we wouldn't be having those conversations until we got kind of deep into orange or into red. Contact tracing and quarantine, we have rules that we have to follow here, and there are requirements for folks who are close contacts to quarantine for a certain number of days, depending on whether they get a negative test or not. So we have to continue to follow all of those rules. And in this activity, we are looking to expand our partnerships with outside agencies and part-time contact tracers who can take on more of that work for us. A lot of district administrators and nurses and other folks were involved in that work last year, and it got in the way of a lot of the daily things that they need to do to keep the educational program going. So we're going to have to continue to pursue some help from partners outside of the district to come in and do some of that contact tracing with us. It is important to note that students who are vaccinated do not need to quarantine if they are discovered to be a close contact of someone who is ill. That's the rule right now. And we have been seeing, as that becomes clear to folks, an increase in the number of vaccinations that the 12 to 17-year-old cohort seems to be getting over the past few months. I speak a little anecdotally on that based on what people are telling me, but I see some glimmers in the data of some increase in vaccination rates for that age group, as much as I can sort of tease that out of the way the CDC provides that data. COVID-19 testing. We've had a lot of conversation about testing, but testing is not something that we want to engage in as in our staff collecting samples, our staff administering tests. The kinds of tests that are most meaningful to us require sort of a more robust kind of sterilization context. And so the rapid tests that are easy to give aren't necessarily as informative to us as some others. So we're not planning, unless we're mandated to offer testing on site. If we're mandated to require testing for any particular person, then we'd be looking for partnerships with our local medical community to help us make that happen off-site. We're also hoping that we don't need to go back to our daily symptom-free assurance forms, though we would reinstitute those or look at reinstituting those if we climbed up into that orange or red level. We feel confident in green or yellow that we don't need that level of tracking. And vaccination, as we near the end here, we're going to continue to work with our partners to make vaccination available to folks who want or need it. But I am not planning, unless we're mandated to do otherwise, to require vaccination for staff or students for any opportunity or activity. I've talked about this before. The state of New Jersey has a well-oiled machine for requiring vaccination in schools. There's already a mechanism for requiring vaccination in schools. So for us to require it outside of that well-recognized process that's backed by the Department of Health and backed by law, I don't feel is appropriate for us. If folks feel that this ought to be a requirement, then it should go through the proper processes and land itself on that schedule for us to use it or to respond to it in the same way that we respond to all vaccination requirements. But right now we have no mandate to require it, so I'm not planning to institute one. I do want to point out that vaccination does allow for some things that, particularly in quarantining, that not being vaccinated doesn't allow. So as I mentioned earlier, if you're found to be a close contact of somebody who's ill, if you're vaccinated, you do not need to quarantine. If you're unvaccinated, you do need to quarantine for up to 10 days or 7 if you test out with a negative test by a certain point. So there are some things in the processes that allow for some more flexibility for those who are vaccinated. Lastly, accommodations for children with disabilities. As always, if any students have difficulties with any of the public health mandates that we have to follow or any of the things that we're doing, then we'll certainly work through our special education processes and other processes to allow exceptions and alternatives. So one of the things that we've done certainly is face masks instead of face coverings, the larger plexiglass face masks instead of the regular cloth mask. Face shield is what I mean to say. So we've used some of those in situations where for medical and other reasons, students had to have an alternative to masking. In this also, again, I just want to reiterate, we are not planning a synchronous remote instruction program at the start of the year. And we're hoping that expanded tutorial, the technology that we have through Google Classroom and other platforms, and traditional home instruction will come to bear and be helpful for us if we need to carry anybody through a long-term absence. When you think about what 10 days of quarantine means, so if an unvaccinated student has to quarantine because they're a close contact of someone who's ill, they can test out under the current rules with a negative test at days 5 through 7. So now their quarantine goes from 10 days down to 7 days. 7 days out of school, let's put a weekend in the middle of that. You're talking about 3 or 4 absences, 2 or 3 absences from each class block potentially. And we feel like we can offer a lot of additional resources to carry that student through that absence without having to compromise the program in the room with live synchronous instruction with half the kids on the computer and half the kids in the room. Because again, we found that to be an unsustainable and really difficult proposition for our program in the classroom. And wherever there are questions from staff or students about accommodations, we always have. This isn't a new thing. We always have gone to our district physician. So we have doctors on the district's end who are working at verifying and weighing in on the medical necessity of any of those accommodations that are requested. So that's something that we have to do. It's something that I think it's important for us to do so that we have objective viewpoints throughout the entire process of the accommodation request. So we're looking at, I don't know if you can see this too well on the screen, but this will be available on our website as well. We're trying to lay out different scenarios for the different colors, and that's basically what's happening here. And again, this is based on the state system rather than the CDC system. The thing to point out here mostly is that this kind of summarizes things that I've said. You know, if we go to orange, then we're going to consider this, but in green and yellow, we're going to do that. And it looks at all different kinds of areas of activity, from lunch to masking, all the different things that I've talked about here tonight. The only thing that might be a new thing on here, you know, how we're going to deploy plexiglass barriers, how we're going to look at whether or not we have an expanded isolation room for students who might be ill or have symptoms or be close contacts. These are some more technical things that we have on this chart for us. But as we flesh this out, this will be on our website later this week. The thing to remember in all of this, as I talk about the state system, and it's a point that I made earlier, the state system, the data in the state system is a little bit lagged. So right now, our situation is not, what our situation is right now is not going to be reflected on the state report until next week. You know, so we have a lag in the data there. We have really strong partnerships with our local public health and medical community to get much more timely information about how things are going. So the hospital is constantly letting us know what the situation is in the hospital. And that's important for us because that's the one metric we can never guess at from any of the other sources. We can find out the positivity rate. We can find out the cases per 100,000. Average and total, we can find all of that, but it's the hospital metric that we can never seem to get at. So the hospital tells us how they're doing. So we have good sources to get this information in a timely manner. So we can react even before we hit those colors through the partnerships that we have. The other thing to say too here is that this metric is averaged across Mercer, Somerset, and Hunterdon counties. And that's where, as we get into orange, there's a lot of this verb consider. Consider for lunch blocks instead of 2. Consider a daily symptom-free assurance form for staff and students. The consider in there is where we come down to what's the situation here in Hunterdon County in our immediate region. How can we tease that information out of this tri-county thing that we're getting from the state? What's going on here? And how does that give us flexibility? So our region might be in orange, but in Hunterdon County, we might actually be yellow or green if you just look at us. And in our immediate region of, you know, Flemington, Raritan, East Amwell, Reddington, you know, all in our immediate region, we may even be better off than the rest of the county. We've seen it come into the county from different directions through different spikes. So we have different ways to be more flexible than waiting each week for the state report on last week's data. And we're working closer and closer with our medical and public health community to zero in on what's the condition right here in Hunterdon County. The reason we want to do this with the state system is, again, is because the federal CDC system doesn't consider all the data that we think is important, like how's the hospital doing, or average of cases instead of total number of cases. There are some strikes against the CDC system that make it difficult for us to use as a gauge for these kinds of decisions. So we're blending different things here, but like I said, we've learned an awful lot of lessons. So we started here, we're going to end here, but I'm going to end here with gratitude because where we are right now compared to where we were at this time last year is a world away. Last year at this time, we were not sure we were going to open the school. Mr. Panico and I had some you know, really tough conversations about where we were and what can we do. But we opened the school in a hybrid model. We didn't have a single long-term interruption to remote. And we're proud of that, even though it was not the full program that we would ever have wanted on any given day. We move into this year with a full program. We're confident that we're going to be able to maintain that. We're going to prioritize that. We're going to fight for that. And these other public health things that we have to do around the edges, and I know there's frustration about some of them. The other public health things that we have to do around the edges feel less important to me than what we've gained over the past year, which is all day, every day, all kids. There's a lot that we're going to struggle through over the next several months. But the prize at the end of it is not, we're going to open the school 2 days a week to dismiss at noon. That's not the prize. The prize is every day, all kids. And that's worth going through a lot of struggle for. So there's a lot more conversation to have about a lot of these individual things, but that's where we are at the moment in our planning, with plans to share more of all of this more broadly with the community this week. And away we go into what we hope will be, and what we're optimistic will be, a year that brings us closer and closer to the normalcy and to the high school experience that we all want for our kids and for our staff members and our community. So thank you for that. I want to turn over a little bit to Mr. Brandt. As part of this, we've been having a lot of conversations about new students and new student orientation and some existing student reorientation, right? So bear with me. I'm going to switch gears here to put his presentation on the screen. Bear with me. He has just 2 quick slides to go through to talk about our plans. So I will. Okay, Mr. Brandt, take it away.
All right, thank you very much. Before heading into what's up for orientation, I'd like to just review briefly some of the information to share with all of you about how vibrant and alive the campus has been this summer so far. Our counseling department has put together incredible group counseling programs and individual sessions that have been available throughout the summer for our students. Our partners at School-Based Counseling sent out an invite to all our students and focused more on the incoming freshmen, but open to any student. And we had over 270 students participate in their little individual one-day sessions where they had some, basically a group counseling session on the anxieties of re-entering back into school after what we just went through this past year. And then they also got a tour of the campus, got to meet some fellow classmates. So we appreciate their work. Our fitness center, Paul Collodi and his team, had over 3,300 individual sign-ins, and that's in both team-based and open sessions, indoor and out, throughout the summer. And our academies and institutes, you can see the numbers of students there involved in our bridge programs, our ELL Academy courses over the summer, and our institute courses. So I just wanted to highlight, it was a pleasure, even though it was a little brief time there where we didn't have to have masks as well. But it was a pleasure to be able to be working with the students, being able to see each other's smiles or frowns, depending on the circumstances. But just again, thank you for your support and allowing us to have this over the summer. And it just gave a vibrancy moving into the school year. And then the next slide, just a brief overview of what we have in store. We're taking some of what we had 2 years ago and previous years prior to the pandemic and combining it with some of the lessons learned of last year. We have a new parent guardian orientation there on Monday night, like we did in traditional years. It's going to be in the auditorium at 6:30, and that invitation went out today. Also, we're spreading out again like we did last year, unlike previous years where orientation was one day. The feedback from last year it was set up over 3 days because of the pandemic and because of grouping and spacing. And the feedback that we got from the students and from the staff who helped chaperone that day in each of those days thought that model actually was more fun. The students got to know each other and got a better vibe of the school. So we're spreading it out over 3 days based on their grade level counselor. So A through F, for example, is coming on Tuesday, then the next cohort and the next cohort each of those 3 days. We're opening up to all incoming 9th graders, but as Dr. Moore mentioned there too, we have a cohort of students who are returning 10th graders or rising 10th graders, but they may have not been on campus last year. They may have been virtual students the whole year as freshmen, or maybe only for a small portion of the year. So we sent out an invite and a survey to them. to see what their input was, and we are inviting a number of them back for basically a reorientation for them. And then the third cohort of students, and it's a typical one as well, are any upperclassmen, non-ninth graders who are transferring from other schools. So we invite them as well for one session. And in that session, they basically meet key staff members, part of their house level team, their counseling team, and information on athletics and activities and how to get involved. They get to meet peers. They go through the whole 2.5 hour long session with a group of peers that they're going to see again at the Alpha homeroom on the first day of school, and then again throughout the year in activity meetings. They get to walk their schedule. That is one thing that we didn't get a chance to do last year because of the spacing. And if you recall, this time last year, we were only allowed to have 25 individuals in a room indoors this time last year. So it's great to be able to say, all right, go walk your schedule, get a sense of where you need to go the first few days of school. And then on their exit, they get their ID picture taken for the yearbook and for their ID, and they get their Chromebook and they get to leave. So we're looking forward to a great week next week, inviting probably close to 1,000 students on campus over that time. That's it.
All right, Mr. Brandt, thank you. Thank you. This just about concludes my report, but let me say one or two more quick things and then we can come up and we have a HIB incident to vote on, and then we're all done with my report here. But I do want to echo some of the thanks there that Mr. Brandt shared. I'm all about gratitude these days, folks. So it's we've got our school-based partners who did a lot of work this summer to bring students on campus all summer. So it was great to be sort of doing our business on campus and going from this meeting to that meeting or this room to that room, and you would run into this tour group of rising ninth graders. And it was just great to interact with them and to have folks on campus. For some reason, folks on campus this summer felt so good and felt so optimistic, more so even in some ways than our growing presence on campus through the spring, as Mr. Brandt and his team did a lot of work to bring more students on campus in the spring. Something about the summer and the hope of it was really ringing loudly for us. And we're carrying that forward as we head into September, again, with a lot of hope and optimism, and thanks for all of the efforts that everyone's exerting and is going to exert for a good solid school year, and something that feels like Hunterdon Central should feel all day, every day, all kids, all opportunities. We're excited. So with that, my report's over. Thank you all for your patience through all of that. Lots of important stuff to cover though. And the last thing we have to do before I'm done, Mr. Panico, is we just have a vote on a HIB incident, and then we can certainly move on. Thank you.
All righty, thank you, Dr. Moore. Can I have a motion on D3 to affirm the HIB 2021-009, please?
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Davidson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Nichol,
Yes.
Mr. Richard,
Yes.
Mr. Panico,
Yes.
Mrs. Kellogg,
Yes.
Dr. Charney,
Yes.
Dr. Wen,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. Now is the time on the agenda for public comment. This is for any items that are on the agenda. So if you are going to address the board, please make sure it is for one of the action items that we have coming up under F, which are organizational, well, F, E, F, G, H, or I, which are our action items. So it'll be 30 minutes at most. If you are interested in speaking, make sure it is on one of the action items on the board. Come up to the podium. If you are in the Zoom, press *9 to raise your hand or press the raise hand button. Just make sure you sign in and state your name, please.
Sure, Kane Fowler from Delaware Township. I'm speaking about, what is this, policy 2431? Yeah, athletic competition. Just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Brandt, to Mr. Spencer, to Coach Wasserman, and to Dr. Moore for taking the time in thinking about and drafting this policy and the changes to extend activities to all students at all times. Really appreciate the time, the energy that it's taken for these types of things in the midst of such huge topics as the pandemic and other considerations. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Can you just make sure you sign in too? Appreciate that. I have no one online, so seeing nobody else in line in person and no one online, we will close public comment and move on to our organizational items.
Vinny, there is a
We
hand up.
did just get one hand up.
Yeah.
So Dr. Moore, if you want to move them to a panelist,
Okay.
if
so-
your phone number ends in 0750, press *6 to unmute, please.
Okay, caller, you are now live.
Barbara Sashaw here on the superintendent's report on vaccines, where they talked about a difference between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated in regard to transmission.
That
And
is
certainly,
can I ask you to move that to the second public comment because it's not an action item. I'm sure there's going to be a couple people speaking on that. And I'd like to group them all at the end. So we will come back to you, Barbara.
I'd like to take care of it right now.
I'd prefer if we keep it in order with the business. So it'll be just about 15 minutes till we get there.
And I also think that your sharing with the community could be improved, the community. I mean, you may be sharing with the students and the teachers, but I'm not sure your sharing with the community is at the level it should be. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with no further online or in person, we are going to move through the organizational items. Can I have a motion on F1, please?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. This is naming the school officials for the 2021-2022 school year. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Davidson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Nichol,
Yes.
Mr. Richard,
Yes.
Mr. Panico,
Yes.
Mrs. Kellogg,
Yes.
Dr. Charney,
Yes.
Dr. Wen,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. Can I have an update from the Student Life and Program Committee, please?
Student Life and Program Committee has several items for consideration tonight. I will review them as shown on the agenda. First off, there are early graduation requests from 2 students. Ms. Cangelosi Hayes did review these with the committee, and they seem to be legitimate requests that I would like us to vote on tonight. Next is the School-Based Youth Services Program Affiliation Agreement with Hunterdon Healthcare. This is to renew our agreement with them for school-based services. Third is an enrollment of the high school in the New Jersey State Interscholastic Athletic Association. This happens every year where we need to approve our participation in that organization. Next, we have several students that will be attending Hunterdon Central from North Hunterdon Voorhees to take advantage of our ELL program. Tuition and transportation is the responsibility of the sending district. We have several policies for second reading. These policies are available to the public and to board members in our board drives. And tuition and transportation. These are for tuition and transportation related charges for special ed students. And finally, we have approval request for a textbook. It's not really a textbook, it's a novel from the English department. This is The Night Watchman by, don't know the author. Anyway, we did review it in our committee, and it sounds like a wonderful addition to the reading list for our students. With that, I would like to move G1 through 7 for approval tonight.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Davidson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Nichol,
Yes.
Mr. Richard.
Yes.
Mr. Panico,
Yes.
Mrs. Kellogg,
Yes.
Dr. Charney,
yes,
Dr. Nguyen,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. Can I have an update from the Operations and Transportation Committee, please?
On August 10th, we discussed the construction summer projects that are moving along nicely. We have on the agenda some rates for substitute bus drivers as well as field trips to approve. We have 4 policies on second reading, which are available to view on board docs. We're looking to authorize application acceptance of the American Rescue Plan Individuals with Disabilities Act, Education Act Basic, a grant funding in the amount of $115,032. We have some surplus property that we're looking to get rid of, some buses and some vans, forklift. And we do have one item, addendum item added today, which is for us to authorize the application acceptance of the Teen Mental Health First Aid grant from the National Council on Mental Well-Being in the amount of $1,000 plus services. With that, I would like to move items H1 through H11.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, can I have a roll call vote, please, Julie?
Yes. Mr. Davidson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Nichol,
Yes.
Mr. Richard,
Yes.
Mr. Panico,
Yes.
Mrs. Kellogg,
Yes.
Dr. Charney,
yes,
Dr. Nguyen,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. Can I have an update from the Personnel Committee, please?
The Personnel Committee met virtually on August 11th. We started the meeting with the introduction of the 3 administrative candidates who are recommended for appointment tonight, that Dr. Moore referred to earlier. Mr. Brandt as principal, Ms. Spitzer as BA, and Mr. Roberto as supervisor of IT. We had some nice discussions with each of the candidates. We then went through the agenda, some of the items that I'll highlight. We have 1 retirement, a paraprofessional who's been here for 17 and a half years. We thank her for her time. 5 resignations. We have a couple of leaves of absences, 3 teachers and a school nurse. In I4, you'll see the appointment of Ms. Spitzer, our new business administrator, who's been the assistant BA, taking the place of Ms. Corbin. We have a memorandum of agreement with the HCEA regarding the hiring of a new maintenance staff member. In I6, we have some contractual appointments, including Mr. Brandt's appointment as principal and Mr. Roberto's as supervisor of the IT department. We have some new rates for substitute secretaries, some stipends that were funded by federal grants for reopening and equity work, our regular hourly per diem appointments, curriculum work, Schedules D coaches, workshops, contract revisions as usual. And then as we towards the end of the personnel section, I-23, we're pleased to announce that we have a contract with the Hunterdon Central Bus Drivers Association. I-24, we have 6 policies for approval on second read, which are available to review in board docs. The link is below. And we are abolishing 1 policy. With that, I would like to move I-1 through I-25.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I just want to reiterate or point out on I-7, we do have an addendum there. Robert Hastings has been added as a special education teacher. So I think that's the only addition here to talk about. Yes.
I want to point out I-1, Janice Gallagher, 17 and a half years in district. It's a long time. So we thank her for her service. She's been here longer than some of the students have been alive. Hearing no further discussion, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Davidson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Nichol,
Yes.
Mr. Richard,
Yes.
Mr. Panico,
Yes.
Mrs. Kellogg,
Yes.
Dr. Charney,
Yes.
Dr. Nguyen,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. Any additional business or board comments at this time? One thing I want to bring up and kind of open for a bit of a discussion here is on the recent mask mandate that we saw come down from Trenton. So the governor, as Dr. Moore had outlined in his presentation, mandated masks for all students and quite frankly, all personnel on school properties across the entire state. This is a statewide mandate, affects all schools in New Jersey. And as we talk through the presentation that we had today, a lot of what we discuss is home rule, right? How do we take that information and localize it to Hunterdon County and Hunterdon Central specifically? We talked about the CDC's matrix for analysis. We talked about the NJDOE's or DOH's matrix for analysis. And we even talked about then taking that beyond, right? Dr. Moore, many of the things where you wrote consideration. How do we distill that down to how it impacts Flemington and the surrounding communities for really localized policymaking? And the mask mandate from the state doesn't do that because it's a statewide thing. It's not a home rule. We have seen other school districts around the state reach out to the governor and urge him to make this a home rule policy. And I just kind of wanted to open the floor for discussion, as awkward as it is with my back to everyone, to see, is this something we support that we want to do? I am happy. I would love to write that letter to the governor because I support it, but I don't know if the entire board is in consideration, and I don't want to push my personal views onto the board without hearing from everyone first.
May I talk? I believe that every kid needs to be in school all day, every day. As a former educator, I can tell you there is no substitute for in-person instruction. To that end, we need to be as safe as possible to ensure that we stay open. There are districts in other states who have already opened where masks are not mandated. Many of these districts have had to close after 5 days because of spread of COVID within the community. So from my perspective, the masking works and the masking should stay in place until things change. Otherwise, we might not have our kids in class all day, every day, full day.
Thank you.
Could I?
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Charney.
Yes, I would support Mr. Richard's position. I feel the same way. As an educator, we have to have kids in school. We have to guarantee as much as we can their safety. And we have to subscribe to state mandates. So I would support those provisions that guarantee as much as possible the health and welfare of students and their ability, maximize their ability to learn in the confines of our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
I'd just like to ask Dr. Moore, I'm on, okay. Do you feel like you have the staff and the data that you would need to make those determinations if this became a home rule issue? And is that part of what you want to have your daily, as part of your daily responsibilities?
I mean, I can't answer that question without admitting that I'm not a medical or a public health expert. That's not where my training is. So I do rely on different partnerships around the community. We have good, strong partnerships with the hospital and with the Department of Health. The thing that I note in all of those conversations is folks appreciate sort of a mandate, because then that's not a decision that they feel like that they have to make within a context in which they might be missing a piece of the puzzle. So I don't feel that we yet have a full local to the minute understanding that we would need to have right now to make those decisions. I do feel confident that we'll grow into that. And I feel like as we continue to move through the coming weeks, that we'll be in a position to, I think, make those calls for our local region. If I had to do that today, it would be difficult because the data doesn't come through to us quite as quickly or to the detail that we would need. So there's a little bit of lack of detailed data for us to make that decision, but everybody knows how we feel about that, and everybody in our partnership circle is working really hard to get us the data that we would need to be in a position to make those decisions on our own. At the end of the day, I think everybody wants the same thing, which is for kids to have as normal an experience as possible. But where there's doubt, where there's concern, I think people are still erring on the side of caution and hoping that we can get through it and have as normal an experience as we can. So I'm hopeful for the future that we'd be in a position to make those decisions. I wouldn't say that right now we're in a good position to feel like we're confident in those decisions.
Thank you. Dennis Davidson.
Prevents this transmission of the virus, whether or not you're vaccinated. Until we have full vaccination, we're really not well protected without masking. And I think it's extremely important that our objective, which is to have every kid in the school every day, all day, is critical based on our history of understanding how much they've suffered in remote learning when this wasn't possible. So I believe that we should, even though it's not fun and it's not desirable and it's not comfortable, go with the masking. And therefore, I would not want to change the mandate.
Oh, sorry. I'm who are here every day, all day, all children, but I also think that should be able to make it this should wear a mask, if only because of the experiences that they have here. And it's a difficult thing having to wear a mask all day. That's my thought.
Thank you. Dr. Wen.
Dr. Nguyen, did you want to speak?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. I just wanted to also comment and that I am supportive of all the comments that were made here this evening. I do believe that we need to reinforce or be aligned to the mandate for the masks for now. And whatever it takes to keep our children in the school system, I think is the utmost importance.
Got it. Thank you. Anybody else we didn't hear from? Okay.
Yeah, so my comment isn't specifically necessarily about the mandates, but masks, but more in response to Mr. Panico's comment about a motion for a home rule. I do believe it is important if Dr. Moore, pursuant to Ms. Kellogg's point, is in a position to make the decision on behalf of our school. I do feel like it is in our kids' best interest to have a home rule where we can make the decision as to what's best for our school, our district, our town. If we are in a position to make that decision to keep our kids safe and to keep our kids here all day, every day, full days, I would be in support of requesting a home rule.
Can I share a thought to
Yes,
in
sir.
response to that? I mean, if there were any request from the boards to the governor or anyone at the state level to consider this as a home rule topic other than, rather than a mandated topic, the one thing that I think would also be helpful to us, to the point of the conversation that Ms. Kellogg and I had, there are certain public health data that we're not getting that we need. And that would be important to include in any advocacy that we have. And we have been having those conversations quite a bit with our partners and up the chain with agencies in Trenton. But there are data that we need, that we don't get, that we have to cobble together from different sources to try and make some of these decisions. And that's something that I would just want to insert into this conversation, that if this is a direction for us to go, there are some things there that I think are worth advocating for as well.
All right. I am not hearing any further discussion from the board. I don't think. Yeah,
Can I just
yeah.
make one more
Yep.
point? To Mr. Nichols' comment, I think that there's a significant difference between providing Dr. Moore with the data that he needs to make decisions for the school and empowering parents to make individual decisions for students. I think that expecting parents to be educated and have access to all of the data they need to make informed decisions is expecting more than most parents are capable of.
All righty. Any other board, doesn't have to be on that topic. This is open board comment and additional business. If anybody has anything else to say, if not, we can move on.
Yeah, I just want to share
Yep.
one thought
Yep.
on an item that you already approved, but I missed the opportunity to give you a little bit more information at the end of our operations and transportation agenda, which is number 11, H11. We got words of a new grant opportunity really at the 11th hour, and I want to give credit to Dr. Webb and Dr. Zurwicki, our new counseling supervisor, for sort of working through an opportunity here for students to be trained in mental health first aid. We had a lot of discussions about this today and found it to be really complementary to the good work that Mr. Brandt has been doing with Sources of Strength as a peer norming program for kids. Now, none of this is teaching kids how to be counselors, but rather it's equipping kids with the skills to be a resource for their friends and to help their friends who might be troubled get to qualified support among our counseling and other outside agencies, among all those resources. So we have an opportunity here to join in with a program that can not only continue to grow those efforts with us, but they complement our existing efforts well, and they come with a lot of free training and even some more bells and whistles for our staff. So I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts about that, and I apologize for missing that opportunity earlier.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Now is the time on the agenda for any public comment for items on or off the agenda. We do have a couple via the online forum. I know we'll have some folks in the Zoom, some people in person. If you want to come up in person, form a line at the microphone. When you do go up, please sign in. If you are online, please make sure you raise your hand or press *9 to raise your hand virtually. And then when you do speak, make sure you state your name. I will start with an online form submission while everybody kind of gets settled here. The first one is from Jerry Goldenstone. Jerry says, can you please tell us why you're holding this school year in person at the regular bell schedule, including a lunch period, when you have around 3,000 students with the Delta variant on the rise? What COVID prevention measures will you be taking? Why can't you cut out the lunch period like last year and end the school year at 12 so the students aren't on top of each other, either in the cafeterias or side by side in the hallways, with the possibility of contracting COVID if they need to hang out in the hallways during lunchtime? Thank you very much for all your time and attention to these matters, Jerry. That, I believe that was answered pretty succinctly, Dr. Moore, in your presentation. Checking online, I do have first person to raise their hand was the call-in. So 0750, if we can go ahead and add to the panelists. So if you press *6, you will unmute yourself and you can speak.
Barbara Sashok calling. I tried to speak earlier. on the difference between the vaccinated students and the unvaccinated students, it's clear that in the last week or so, there's been a lot of reports on how the vaccinated are transmitting the COVID and the Delta. And so that is a problem. And certainly to call out unvaccinated when both can transmit the Delta and the COVID seems to be wrong. You know, the Cleveland Clinic and I think even the CDC and Dr. Walensky has been noticing this, the breakthroughs that are happening with the vaccinated. The vaccinated are getting sick and they are also transmitting. So that to try to treat unvaccinated kids differently and people differently doesn't make sense to me. And I also would like to know how we can get, a person can get more detailed information on the various committee reports. Since they're done so quickly, verbally on this meeting, where is the background where last year we used to get all the detail? And that seems to be missing now in the verbal reports. And also I don't know, is there another place where it's all written down someplace?
Thank you, Barbara. There is,
Hello?
if you look in the online board docs system that we moved to earlier this summer, there is the full detail of everything that we have discussed there. So that similar update that you're used to seeing is now just online via board docs, the same place where you got the Zoom link right off the school website. That's there. All right, we will go back to the online response. Krista Glenn said, I am writing to encourage the board of Hunterdon Central and the superintendent to write a letter to the governor in response to his recent school mask mandate to be put in place for when students return in a few weeks. Previously, the governor had left this decision up to each individual school district based on their population, parental feedback, and local data. This was the right approach. The state has over 500 diverse school districts in various different areas. A blanket mask mandate does not meet the needs of every community or school district. Additionally, as a parent myself of 2 girls, I feel I have the right to assess my child's risk or any outside risk and make the decision best or the course of action. I feel all parents want this choice in many aspects of their child's life. I'm asking that you respect a parent's decision on if they want their child to wear a mask or not and ask for a stay on this mandate. Additionally, information should be requested of the governor of this cause for his reverse decision and the need for more data on the risk to children. There are other school districts in the state that are taking action on this issue. According to an article posted on the Wall Street Journal, there have been no studies done that have conclusively confirmed that masks reduce COVID transmission in children. However, there has been much data and information on the negative effect of masks on children, skin problems, myopia, increased levels of carbon dioxide, and the possible pathogens left on masks if not replaced often. Additionally, children learn their way through life by relying on facial expressions and body language. By encouraging children, even at the high school level, to limit interaction or prevent them from expressing themselves fully, we are doing undue harm for their future growth and confidence. Again, I'm asking the board write a letter to the governor to request he reverse his decision and leave it to parents' choice. Thank you. We will go back to the Zoom. We have one person with their hand up in the Zoom. It is Brito ESV. So if you unmute, you should be good to talk. I think you just have to unmute there in your Zoom. I don't think you're a call-in, but if you are, it's *6. Otherwise, you should be able to unmute it from your Zoom panel down on the bottom. All right, we will. Yep, you're good there. You can speak now. We can't hear you still, though. So if you're speaking, it looks like you're unmuted. We just can't hear you. We do have one person that wants to speak in person. So we'll come back to you So if you want to just put them back down, perfect. We'll come right back to you. Mr. Collins.
Good evening, Scott Cohen. Just taking a moment, also in the notion and spirit of thankfulness for the board and Hunterdon Central's work over the summer for continuing the ESY program. Michelle Murphy and Heather Beam, as well as a slew of faculty, did an outstanding job in ensuring that our children were still able to go out and do community-based instruction, which was not something that was able to be done over the last school year. So it's very empowering to see that we're moving in the right direction, to get our kids back into the field and getting the job shadowing and experiences, the work experiences that they need to be successfully transitioning from the workplace readiness program into society. So I thank everybody here for their support for that. And a special shout out. It's hard to name all the faculty that was involved, but it's a cadre of amazing paraprofessionals and support people. And they did an amazing job bringing in all kinds of programming over the summer. So we applaud the staff and appreciate that work.
Thank you for that, Mr. Cohen. I just want to, I'm remiss in not celebrating everything that needs to be celebrated, but it's been a wonderful summer with a lot going on. And that was a high point of a lot of days walking across campus, was finding those students out and about in the gardens and elsewhere on campus. And again, I'm really thankful and really grateful for all that kids were able to do on campus this summer. It's been great to see them come back. So thank you for those comments, sir.
All right, we have, we'll try that one again. So if you could promote 8481, that was the Zoom user who we couldn't get to hear their audio. Same person, yep. Alrighty, if you want to press *6, that should unmute you and we should be able to hear you.
Hey, Vinny, it's Victoria Brito. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. We got you.
Excellent. Thank you. So a couple things. One, I appreciate you taking the lead in addressing writing the governor. I do have a comment for those who opposed it. I don't think maybe they do fully understand, but I don't think asking for a home rule means that we will automatically unmask. I think what it means, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the district would have the opportunity to make that decision versus the governor. And I think that's what you would go and write to the governor. So I would really ask the board to understand what you're asking and reconsider some of the the negative comments towards it. I am not for masks, as you know, and I think the board knows, but I do think regardless, it should be a home rule. It should not be something that someone in Trenton who has no idea what's going on in Hunterdon and in Hunterdon Central has any say in, number one. Number two, I'm not sure, and forgive me that I don't know your name in the back with the sunglasses on your head. I would like to make a comment. I'm actually very embarrassed by your comment. I don't know if you have children. I don't know if you have children in the district. But the fact that you made a comment that parents don't have the ability or the details to make those decisions, it's beyond our capabilities. You should be ashamed of that, because I can tell you right now, there's nothing more important to me and probably 99.9% of the parents, especially in this district, than their children. And I guarantee more people than not have as much information, if not more than you or the board, on this issue. And there's nobody that can make a decision for their children better than the parents. So the fact that you made that statement, I hope you misspoke and didn't understand how ignorant and condescending it sounded. But every parent should be ashamed of that comment coming from our board, and you should really apologize. Because for you to think that our parents are ignorant and don't understand what's going on, we've been living this real time for almost 2 years. It's been 18 months, over 2 years, where our kids were impacted, okay? All of this is ridiculous now. So don't tell us that we don't know what's best for our children, because we certainly do. And I, for one, am not for masks, but I absolutely am for our district to make the decision for our children. I definitely think the parents should, but if we have to go and make it a home rule versus the governor, that's what it should be. And I implore all of you to support Vinny's ask to go write the governor, because all of these parents will and have. And believe me, you're all up for a vote eventually, and you'll be voted off. Because if you don't advise the governor that we can make the best decisions for our students and our children, it doesn't make sense. I don't know how you think that somebody sitting in Trenton, or actually, I don't know, he's been in Italy, can make a better decision for our children. So Vinny, I will support you, and I'll make sure others support you in writing that letter. And if you can't write it, we'll all write it for you, and we'll make sure that we put pressure on Trenton. But I first will start with putting pressure on this board to make the right decision. And I would like an apology from you in the back. And I apologize for not knowing your name. I can't see your nameplate. So I apologize for that, but I'm embarrassed that you actually sit on our board and can make that statement. I hope it was misspoken and you didn't understand what it sounded like, but you basically insulted every parent in this district.
Thank you, Ms. Brito. Next up
Yep.
is Renee Foster. So we want to move
Vinny?
Renee up. Yeah,
Can I respond to that?
if you'd like to.
I definitely apologize for those comments, and I wanted those words back as soon as they came out of my mouth. So I have great respect for every parent in this district and everything that they put into their children, and I withdraw those comments.
Thank you. Renee Foster. So we're going to promote Renee. If you'd like to unmute, you can. This will be the last comment as well. We're coming up on time, and nobody else has their hand up. And oh no, we got one in line. I'm sorry, we got one in line as well. I got you. So Renee, go ahead and state your name and please speak.
Hi, my name is Renee Foster, and I have an upcoming freshman who will be attending high school this year. I would like to just echo some of Victoria Brito's statements respectfully. You know, the parents are definitely contacting people like myself who are trying to just say that there's a lot of data out there that's not readily available to a lot of the board. I'm happy to assist you to get you any kind of other data that is outside of some of the resources that you're using. And I know that it by the standard has been by using the CDC and, you know, our local departments, but fairly staying, you know, our children, they're all very different. They don't all fit into one category. There are many, many instances that children are with legitimate medical reasons that should alter their mandated mask wearing and such, that it's become very difficult, and nobody has a pulse on individual children like a parent. I don't think it's unfair to just ask, you know, that we perhaps just at least get into a discussion and start to entertain instead of, you know, all of us have been cooperating and really pushing to try to get to where we are. And I know it's been a hard thing for everybody, but we had 3,300 kids, my son being one of them, checking into the workouts all summer. And these kids were unmasked. So and kids who wanted to mask, they did mask. But think about, you know, 3,300 kids. They were there every day, faithfully working together in close quarters, and everybody did great. If somebody was sick, they stayed home. And, you know, and I do think that this is something that we need to entertain if we want to move forward in our school. You know, our school is almost equivalent to like a college campus, and we are different than some other settings. And I do think it is wisdom to say that we should be applying our specific situations to our specific school. You are all our voice there. And we do agree there are some precautions to be made, absolutely. But I do think that there's another side of the story that's not being shared openly. My husband and I are doctors of chiropractic, and I know that that doesn't necessarily always captivate the attention of people because it's not a medical profession, but, you know, more than a quarter of our practice is pediatric. And we do have to keep track of all the details clinically of the patterns we see, both physically, emotionally, and related to, you know, how everybody's responding to the prolonged masking, as well as how kids who are getting the vaccine are responding. And we keep very great detail about this because we're responsible also for reporting and also corresponding with their other doctors. So I can tell you that, you know, there is definitely a lot of information that's being squashed that parents aren't aren't able to express in a way that, I'd like to just see that the board would like to at least be open-minded, to not just be like, boom, this is a mandate. A mandate is actually not a law, but and we can explore that discussion another time. I did really enjoy listening tonight because it's the first time I've sat in for the high school meeting. I have been very involved with Reddington Middle School, and I know that there's a lot of hard decisions to make, but I do really think that we absolutely do have to incorporate the parents of our district and let them have input into their individual children on how this year progresses, and would thank you for considering that.
Thank you, Renee. Sorry, I missed you. Last comment is going to be here in person.
Hi, Sherry Riggy. I want to just start by thanking you, the board. I know the time and energy that you've put into the last 2 years, and it has not been easy. I'd like to thank Mr. Brandt. He's been wonderful, and the faculty at Hunterdon Central have been wonderful. So I'd like to start with that. Two parts to my comment. Part one is in regards to Dr. Moore's presentation. I have a question about when a student receives COVID, has COVID, or is required to quarantine on those 10 days. Is that considered an excused or an unexcused absence? And how is that affecting their academics? And secondly, with regards to teachers, what will be the protocol or the process that will be required of teachers when a student is out for that length of time? So will there be policies in place and a procedure in place that teachers are required to follow exactly the same? I know the commitment of most of the teachers is excellent and they will do what they need to do, but what will happen when students are not getting the education they legally deserve? So that is a concern. That's part one. And part two, regarding masking, I agree with the last two speakers completely about having a home rule in the same way that Dr. Moore spoke in his presentation about the fact that we're following New Jersey Health Department in terms of the different colors and in when certain classrooms or spaces will be open, when we're able to have 4 lunch blocks versus 2 lunch blocks. And all of those things are all home rules. In the same way, why can't we ask for a home rule with regards to masking? If we're setting our own home rules in different, those types of different areas, what is the difference in that case? I'm also very concerned about what we will be doing with masking outside. Will the students be disciplined, penalized for taking their mask off outside if they need to catch their breath after being in a mask for 5 or 6 hours straight? I'm concerned about our athletes who are indoors, who will be masked from 7:30 a.m. until, in some cases, 8:00 p.m. when they come off of a bus after an away game. How are we dealing with this? How are we discussing this? How are we protecting the safety of our children?
Thank you.
You share some thoughts?
If you'd like to, Dr. Moore.
Yeah, thank you.
By the way, I do want to say this does close public comment.
Okay, well, thank you for those questions and those comments. A couple of things I can respond to directly now, and then a few other things I'd be happy to connect with you afterwards. I'll also, if I can get an email or something, we can connect on some specific questions there. But the masking mandate doesn't cover outdoors. So students are able to take their masks off outdoors, and we're actually very thankful for that because that's very different from what we had last year. And so with 8-minute passing time, we're pretty confident that students will be able to find times to take their masks off outside. And the same goes for other kinds of activities. If you're engaged in sort of physical activity inside, you're in gym class, or you're doing a sport, you can also take off your mask. So there will be times when students can take off their masks. And this all, again, is with the hope that this mandate is not necessary for too deep into the school year, that we're able to view this as a temporary thing. So there's one thought there. The other questions you brought up, definitely, we need to get a little clarity from the state on the laws around absences, but we've been having conversations. We just had one this morning talking about if a student is excluded because they're a close contact and they're not sick, we don't want to count that against them in their attendance in any way. And we do have expectations that teachers are going to be doing some things to make sure that those kids stay on track. And those kids will have access to all sorts of expanded after-hours tutorial that we're going to be offering also. So we're confident that as long as we don't get bowled over by a huge number of students, in which case the public health situation is something that we all need to worry about. But if we're dealing with levels, hopeful levels of illness and close contact, then we're going to be able to keep those students up to date and give them lots of opportunities to be engaged in instruction. So we're going to work at that as we go, though, and try to work out kinks as we go. And then it'll be really important for us to hear from parents who are in that situation about what's working and what's not working. Who are the teachers who are doing things that parents appreciate, practices that we want to spread out throughout the rest of the staff, and what are the concerns that parents have about specific other scenarios that we need to make sure aren't being replicated across other classrooms. So there's a lot of partnership there that we plan. So absences is something that we need to get a little more clarity on, but we're hopeful that we'll be able to, with a student who's quarantined for close contact, that they're not going to be penalized in any way for that. If a student has COVID, they're sick. And that's a different thing. But if a student is given a clean medical bill of health and they're just quarantining because they were close contact and they're not vaccinated, and they therefore have to quarantine, we're going to do everything we can to work with that student to make sure it doesn't penalize their attendance record, and also to make sure that they're able to keep up in all the different ways that we can. But I'll get your information and I'll send you a note too. We can connect separately on anything I didn't answer.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. I would like at this time to take a 15-minute break and then immediately convene into executive session for legal and personnel,
Legal personnel negotiations.
For approximately 30 minutes. When we return, there will be no action taken. We will return to public just to close. There will be no action taken. Can I have a motion and a second on that?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, so Dr. Charney and Dr. Nguyen, you have an email with our link for closed session. I'm going to turn over the host to you, Mr. Moss, okay?
Okay, perfect. And we said 15-minute break. Is that what we said?
Yeah, we'll convene in exec at 8:45.
Okay, perfect. See you then.
Can I have a motion to return to public session, please?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.